The downsides here are, you're on your own, especially if you're a first-time business owner and you've never been through the process, you've never owned a business, know what to look for. This can be tricky. There's no ongoing support systems. The reason people choose franchising is for having a proven model with systems. One of my favorite parts is just being a part of a community of owners, having other people doing the exact same business that you're doing, just in different areas, and being able to share your challenges that you're facing and share the highlights. Welcome to the Franchise Champion Show. I'm your host, Alan Regala, CEO and founder of Athlete to Owner Franchise Coaching. I was a D1 athlete and used the principles of high performance training to build and sell a multi-million-dollar franchise business. And now I want to help others do the same. So let's go. Welcome, everybody. Good to see some new faces here and some familiar faces as well. Since we're streaming here, I know we got some people that are going to be trickling in. That's all right. We're just going to go ahead and get started, though. So I am Alan Regala, and I'm the owner of Athlete to Owner Franchise Coaching. We're going to go dive a little bit into just a quick history of my story for those that don't know me. Didn't hear this before. I was an undergrad at Cal Poly, played Division I tennis there. Ended up working for a year in the corporate world before deciding this isn't for me. I'm not ready to move on. So got my master's at Stanford in mechanical engineering, was a consultant at IDEO for a couple of years. And that's when a guy from the accounting department handed me Rich Dad Poor Dad and said, hey, you should really own a business. And after reading through that, I was like, you know what? I think you're right. I'm young and I really feel like business ownership makes a lot of sense. So why not give it a shot? So I ended up inventing my own product and wrote my own patents, had it made overseas, blah, blah, blah. Got into Entrepreneur Magazine, which was pretty cool. And then the iPhone came out and was like, my product is no longer going to be useful in this world. So I went through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship and basically, had my first failure, actually my second failure behind me. And so we decided to move to Seattle for my wife's work, where I ended up utilizing a franchise coach, Mason here, to help me find a business. And through that process, I ended up starting Shelf Genie of Seattle, which is a home improvement franchise. And over the period of 14 years, I built that up and I had a great team in place. And I was able to go and do things with my family, with my kids. I never missed any games. We went on some great vacations together. I even traveled the world playing tennis, which was pretty amazing. And this business allowed me to do that. So I had that lifestyle component to it. It also brought in a great amount of money. So I was able to pay for kids' colleges and, buy a new house, and also brought me purpose, which I realized going through the business that was a big part of what I was doing. And part of why I was successful is incorporating purpose into my work. I decided last year, after 14 years, that it was time to sell and move on to the next thing. And so I did that and then came full circle and decided to become a franchise coach myself so that I can help other people that are interested in taking control over their financial and lifestyle goals. So that's what I do now. A couple of weeks ago or last month, we had our first workshop where we talked about 4 different career options: working in corporate and buying a business, starting independent business and buying a franchise. And I won't go over all this right now, but basically what it comes down to is, owning a business has its advantages in that you're building an asset. Over time, when you're working, you're creating an asset and you've got major tax benefits. So from a financial standpoint, it can be very, very advantageous. And also, having control over your time and the autonomy is another important aspect of that as well. So today we're going to be focusing on buying an existing business and buying a franchise and what the differences are, pros and cons of each of those. So what are you actually buying when you're buying an existing business? Here's some. What are you buying? You're buying a name. Yep. The brand. What else? Existing customers, contracts. Yep. Cash flow, right? You're buying cash flow essentially, right? You got also inventory and equipment, things of that nature, the reputation, and hopefully to some degree, the owner's knowledge, whatever they can, transfer to you. And so the cost of business, there's different ways of establishing the valuation of a business, and there are different models, different ways of looking at it. But typically, you take what the profit of the business, or what is often called seller discretionary earnings, which is basically all the positive stuff that comes from the business. So that can be a salary plus the actual profit from the business, plus whatever perks people might be running through the business or whatever. And then it's generally a multiple of that. And that could be anywhere from 3 to 5 times that multiple, or it could be less, it could be more, just depends. But, just as an example, so if a business is making $300,000 in seller discretionary income, which could be like $100,000 in their salary plus $200,000 in profit. We'll say, that could sell for, let's say, $900,000 to $1.5 million, just as an example. So, there's different types, obviously, of businesses that are available on the market. You've got some Main Street businesses, sometimes the ones that are at this kind of price range, $100,000 to like $500,000. You might find say a small coffee shop. And generally speaking, these are kind of, it's kind of like a job, right? It's usually a very small few amount of people. It's maybe the owner is just themselves working this particular business. Maybe they got a little bit of help. And then typically as you get higher and higher up in the size of the business, the cost of the business, you usually have more employees, a bigger team. And eventually, you've got like managers in place and other people in place so that the business can run a bit more on its own. Process for buying a business can be anywhere from 4 months to, over a year. It really depends on what it is you're looking for, how much money you have, and, how things just kind of tend to line up. Have you been looking at existing businesses? You have? Okay. How long have you been in that process?
I mean, I toy around with the idea of it.
Sure.
Is myself, but usually it's a lot of junk stuff.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
So probably I've been thinking about for pickle probably a year or two.
Year or two. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So the entrepreneurship through acquisition is a big thing. And it really comes down to like, can you find the right thing? What's the timing of that? Right? What you're looking for and what becomes available and getting it before someone else.
I find a lot of the owners typically it's their baby, so they
Their baby. Yeah, exactly.
Is this really worth it? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I definitely see people that don't really understand the true value of their own business because it's their baby. And so they think it's worth way, way more than it actually is. Well, more than other people are willing to pay anyways. So, obviously you have to find the business, right? Use some initial screening that happens. If you end up finding something that is desirable, you would have a letter of intent that says, hey, I'm willing to pay X amount of money for this. And really at that stage, if they agree to that, the due diligence process is what takes the longest. And this is where most deals tend to fall apart, is once you start looking into the business and you find out that, this is not what I thought it was. Then you've got financing and closing as well. And so part of that due diligence process, what, people tend to find, which ends up making the deal fall apart, red flags such as, the seller not providing their detailed financials. And similarly, like the books don't match the bank statements. That's a big thing, right? So you'll typically want to hire like a forensic accountant to go through those financials. And so you're spending money on ensuring that the information they're providing is accurate because theoretically you'd be spending a lot of money. I want to make sure this is all making sense. Those are obviously obvious red flags. Other ones are, this revenue been declining for some period of time, for multiple years, or maybe they have just a few customers that make up a huge outsized portion of the business itself, which can be scary if they happen to leave or not become customers. If you have key employees, like a manager or key people in the organization that are planning to leave, or maybe there's a lease on this business and it's going to be expiring soon. If that goes and they don't renew the lease, then obviously that's going to be a problem as well. So the upsides, the reason people want to buy an existing business are the immediate cash flow, right? If you spend money and then you're like making money right away from day one, that would be the ideal scenario. It's already been there, so it's proven in your very specific market. If you've got that existing customer base, you can see actual tax returns. And hopefully all those numbers line up, all of that looks good. And so there are really great benefits to buying existing business if you can find the right one. Again, if the stars align and you're patient and you go through this process with diligence, it can be something that's worthwhile. But the downsides here are, you're on your own. And so especially if you're a first-time business owner and you've never been through the process, you've never owned a business, managed a team, you kind of know what to look for. This can be tricky. There's no ongoing support systems. The owner, once they sell, will hopefully provide you with their knowledge for some period of time that's designated. But after that, there's really nothing else. Big thing for me here is, it's just what don't you know? You're seeing what's on the outside and everything else, but especially if you haven't been in this industry before, or owned a business, then you maybe don't know what you don't know. Are there systems in place? Are they documented? Do you have customers or employees leaving? And then, of course, there's the upfront cost, right? And this multiple that you're paying for, that is the additional expense, and you're paying because they've got this cash flow that's already coming in. And so, the better the business is doing, usually the higher that multiple is. But it can be really expensive and prohibitive for a lot of people trying to get into business ownership. And of course, industry experience. If you have that industry expertise, this is a lot easier of a process because you know better how to evaluate the business. And so, if you this can make a lot of sense for people that do have ownership experience already. They have industry experience and they have a lot of capital or strong financing to make this a possibility. And also someone who is a skilled operator who can improve systems or help create systems over time.
If you're wondering if franchise ownership is right for you, I'd love to help. As a franchise coach, I work one-on-one with my clients to 1, find the perfect business match for their goals, skills, and investment level, and 2, help them prepare to be champions in their business. Here's the best part. My coaching services are completely free. To schedule a 15-minute introduction call, visit athlete2owner.com. The link is in the show notes. Now, back to our show.
So now we're going to jump into franchising. I mentioned this last time in the last workshop, that franchising really is just a business, right? And the business this is a way for the founder of that business to expand. And it's really a method of distribution to take something that's successful in one area, use those systems and processes and provide really great training to expand it to other areas across the country, and utilize owners to bring those stores to fruition who are going to be invested in the success of those businesses instead of paying just managers or employees to try to start those businesses. It's way more than just food. Everyone thinks of McDonald's as the classic franchise example. And while McDonald's is a franchise, there's just so many other options out there other than food. So we've got some examples here. So we've got kids, right? This is like, youth sports. We've got the senior industry. I believe it's 10,000 people a day turning 65 plus every day. They call it the silver tsunami. We've got the pet industry, all things related to pets, including pet lodging, care, grooming, even pet waste removal. We've got the home improvement space. We've got fitness, Pilates, lots of different fitness brands. We've got health and wellness. Commercial kitchen hood cleaning is a franchise. We've got hydraulic hose replacement as a franchise. What's crazy is that these businesses, like super, super niche, you would have never thought this was even like a thing, but they actually do quite well. Biohazard removal and hoarding cleanup. And for those that are, not interested in building something with, a team of people, maybe they're just like, I want to do something that's more just me. And, it is kind of like a job, but I still want to be a part of something, a system, something bigger than just myself. There's even like business coaching is a franchise. This spans so many different industries, so many different options. The reason people choose franchising is for having a proven model with systems, having that high level of training and support so that when you get started, they're going to walk you through that whole process and you're not going to be on your own. No industry experience required. This is pretty unique, I think, in that you can have no prior experience in, maybe you have, a tech job, or your background is in tech or whatever, but you can go and do, a pet, a dog grooming business, right? Or if you have experience in food, you can do something in the fitness space. It's because of that level of training that's there and the support, you're able to do that. I love this. One of my favorite parts is just being a part of a community of owners. So having other people doing the exact same business that you're doing, just in different areas, and being able to share your challenges that you're facing and share the highlights. What are you doing that's working? Marketing, sales, all sorts of things that makes this a really special thing. Of course, you get, bulk pricing, supply chain advantages through franchising, great technology that the franchisor is typically always, they want to have some competitive advantage in trying to make it easy for a franchisee to succeed, because that's how they make money, is by the franchisee bringing in money, right? And so technology is a big aspect of that. So, you get to choose the business, which is, I think, really cool, versus with, buying an existing business. It becomes typically more about looking at the numbers, making sure the numbers look right, versus here, obviously the numbers also need to work out well, but you can factor in other types of things like your skill sets, your goals financially and lifestyle, as well as the investment level. There are a couple different ownership models. Most people will start out as an owner operator, and that's where you're actually in the business full time. This is like your full time thing, and you're getting it started. And eventually, over time, as things progress, and you if you grow it the right way and you've got it planned correctly, you can turn it into semi-absentee if you have the right team in place, where you can pull back and not work in the business full time. There are options for people to start semi-absentee where they start it with a manager in place already. And that's something that can work if you have the right person in place. Not all franchisors will allow that unless that person has some equity in the business, because the last thing you want is for that manager to leave and like you've got no one else to fill in. But two different options. For a lot of people, that semi-absentee is eventually something they want to get to reach those lifestyle goals. So downsides to franchising. Well, one, it does take hard work. So if you're not willing to work hard, this probably isn't going to be for you. But typically, that is with the first like 12 to 18 months, you're going to work the hardest. People work hard in their corporate jobs. They work hard for someone else. So really, it's just working hard, for yourself. But that first 12 months to 18 months to 2 years is going to be the toughest time frame typically. You're not going to have 100% control. So you won't be able to add chow mein to the McDonald's menu, if that's something that you would like to do. But what's nice about that is that you don't have 100% control, but you also don't have 100% responsibility. So when I had my first business and I had manufacturing done overseas and I had all the marketing I was doing and trade shows and I had patents and all these other things that I was having to worry about, I was 100% responsible for everything. So that is actually can be a blessing if you have a system, a company that is doing their part and providing support. Like with my home improvement business, they had a call center. So I didn't have to have a full-time employee answering phones, right? They had a call center that was open, way more hours than I would have hired for, right? And they took care of all the manufacturing and all these other things that I could just focus on the important things, which generally in a business is going to be like marketing and sales. Those are generally the two biggest things that are going to drive growth of your business. Obviously, there's other things like you have to provide your service and do a good job of that. But as the owner, you're typically working on the business is growth. There are franchise fees and royalties that have to get paid, of course. So that's a downside. For me, it was always focused on the ROI, because at the end of the day, what you're looking for is this profit, right? Between this seller discretionary earnings, right? Which is whatever you're making, you're paying yourself, plus whatever the business is making. Like that is at the end of the day what matters. And you have, your revenue at the top, and then all the expenses, and then at the end, whatever debt service you might have if you have a loan or something. But at the end, it's what you keep, right? That's really what matters at the end of the day. And so you incorporate royalties and all these other things just because a business, let's say it's a painting business here that has royalties versus an independent business that's a painting business and does not have royalties, you might assume that they're going to have less expenses, but that may not actually be true. Some of the things the franchisor is providing, like the technology and the bulk discounts and the pricing they're getting and these other things, can actually have the expenses be less than this other independent business, or maybe just equivalent, So at the end of the day, it comes down to that. What's that return? What is that profit that you're seeking? And what does it cost to own a franchise? So just one example here on the lower end. This is a brand called Fibernew, which does restoration in like vinyl and leather and plastic. And their total investment costs is $89,000, right? So that's on the lower end. Generally, I tell people like around $100,000 on the low end. And then you've got something like indoor trampoline park, which is $5.2 million. You've seen the size, the sizes of those places are gigantic. And, that's probably more close to like a tennis center or something like that. So they can be all over the place. So how much money do you need typically at a very minimum, if you're looking to do something that's just owner operator, you need at least $50,000 liquid is generally what I recommend for people, and $100,000 net worth with a credit score of 720. Well, these there's nothing. These aren't like set in stone. People have different situations and whatnot. It depends largely on how you would get funding, right? So people have different ways of getting funding. If you're trying to get like an SBA loan, then having like the credit score, for example, is important. And the net worth part of it also is you don't want to go into a business. I would hate for someone to get into a business and like if this thing failed, they're living on the streets, right? Like you don't want to be necessarily in that situation. And so part of the requirements that like franchisors will have is so that to make sure you have some buffer there. And so that if something happens, like, you're not being, you're not going to living on the streets. So if you're looking at more of a semi-absentee model, maybe you're looking at growing this and expanding from the get-go, you're going to need more capital, a liquid capital, and obviously a higher net worth. And this is something you really want to plan out from the beginning. This is not something that you want to try to figure out later once you're already in, because it can affect how your funding options from the beginning. It's easier to get, for example, like an SBA loan that's a larger amount at the beginning, if you know that you're going to need certain things to expand. And when you plan that out to have the right amount of capital needed to expand, versus if you have one, say, territory that you purchase and you open it, and now if you try to get a loan, it's going to be based on your actual numbers for that particular business, which may or may not allow you to get the money that you need. So, and also you want to think about other things like, are there territories available for expansion? What are my options for expanding if I do decide want to go that route? So most people will get an SBA loan. It's the most common, and it's typically like a 10 to 20% injection. And so that means if, let's say, the total investment of a business is $150,000, it could be as little as $15,000 of actual cash that you need to put in if you're borrowing the rest of that. But so when I say 50,000 as far as being a minimum, yeah, you can actually need less cash, but again, you still want to have some buffer and some other stuff in there to make sure that you're not depleting all of your funds. There's traditional financing, which is going through banks, of course. This is a really interesting one. It's called rollover on business startup, ROBS. And so you can actually use your retirement funds to invest in your business, which is really cool. So if you have a 401k or a different type of retirement that you have from a previous employer, you can, instead of using that money to invest in other businesses like mutual funds and whatnot, you actually create a company, C corporation, and then you invest that money into that new corporation that you just created. So you're investing in your own business, and there's no penalty for pulling money out early, which is really cool. And you can also use a combination of that plus the SBA loan if you want to. Yep, exactly. And then, of course, you can pay cash or have investors or partners that can fund the business too.
Question.
Yeah.
If you suppose you had like a traditional 401k or IRA that you wanted to use for that, and when my business started, do you pay taxes then upon the sale of the business? Or when do you incur taxes on that?
Yes, it's after the business is sold. So yeah. I mean, it just exactly. I mean, it's like you use your funds in the 401k right now. You invest in some mutual funds that end up going south or whatever. It's the same. Yeah.
Is that how you can withdraw retirement funds that are typically restricted?
You're not withdrawing the funds. You're investing. Correct. So yeah, you're not withdrawing it. Because if you withdraw it, you do have to pay penalties. You're simply investing in a business that happens to be your business. Just like, the retirement funds usually are invested in different options like mutual funds and whatnot. It just happens to be a business that you own. That's the way that it's done.
It's a fortune.
I'm not sure the number. Oh, yeah. No, it's a little different from that, but the essence is you're investing. You're not withdrawing any funds. You're simply you're redirecting the funds into something that you own, and then you can utilize those to start the business.
I don't know if this is like a woman thing, but like I have a lot more fear than my peers. I think I think the worst case scenario is going to happen. And so I think the benefit is that like if everything were to fail, then at least I use pre-tax income to fund the business that I can later
Yes,
to pay loss or like taxes. I
that's
think
true.
that if it grows and into something more, then presumably I have to pay a lot more taxes whenever I sell.
Yeah.
Unless you know.
Or yeah, and then there's
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a good thing. I mean, at the end of the day, paying taxes, some taxes is a good thing because you're making money, but yeah, it's an interesting twist here that a lot of people haven't thought about, but it's a good source of funds that many people don't know about.
Hey, quick note. If you're curious about franchising, I've got a free guide that might save you a ton of headaches. It's the 5 mistakes that prevent people from finding the right franchise. Real stuff that I've seen cost people 6 figures and years of time. You don't want to miss this. Just go to athletetoowner.com/mistakes or hit the show notes. Now back to the show.
Okay, so I have just a couple examples here. So this is a business called Hallmark Home Care, and it's in the senior industry. As I mentioned before, this is a referral agency, and this is information that is provided in the franchise disclosure document. I'll talk about it a little bit later. An example here: franchisee, grossing $1 million, EBITDA, which is their profit essentially. Is 217,000, and investment for this particular business range between 109,000 to 135,000. Well, so the SDE will usually the seller discretionary earnings will come from whatever their profit is plus whatever they're paying themselves and whatever incidental things that, whatever positive attributes that would go to the owner. For example, some people will run certain things through their business, because it's an expense, right? And so all of those things usually you calculate and say, okay, these are all, vacations and other things that, they would generally apply to their, to themselves and not necessarily the business, get included in that seller discretionary income earnings. With the EBITDA, that's the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If the goal is to try to find how much are they making at the end of the day? What's their profit? How much is an owner making? That's like kind of what you want to know at the end of the day, really. And so this document, the franchise disclosure document, they'll have some information. And most FDDs for various brands out there have very limited information. Like some of them will provide full profit and loss statements that have all the information, and some for every location. And then some will have no information. But what you really care about is how much money you're making at the end of the day, right? And when it comes to franchising, it's talking to owners is where you're going to get that information, because the information in the franchise disclosure document is going to vary quite a bit, and it's going to give you averages, if anything. Typically, you really, as part of the process, you're going to end up talking to owners and getting that information from that. There's another example, Jet Set Pilates. You heard of Jet Set? Yeah. There's one in Bellevue, and then there's other ones that are in construction. It's a very crowded space. Yeah.
That's very
Yeah. Pilates it's amazing. I haven't done it myself, but I've heard so many good things about it. It's been around for a while now, and it's been doing really well, which is why there's so many out there. So with this particular one, it's a very labor light staffing model. You do need a physical brick and mortar space for the studio, of course. It's a manager model where you have a manager of the studio and the owner would just be managing this person. This is the average gross revenue for across the system from the 2025 FTD, 920K. EBITDA on this one is, so the profit on this one before taxes, depreciation, and amortization is 30%, which is really incredible. Okay, is very good. And the investment level here, you can see is much higher because you have the build out of a space, a studio, 413 to 806K. So franchising tends to make sense if you're looking for something with proven systems and to have that support behind you. You don't have to have that prior experience in any particular industry. It can help, obviously, if you do, but it's not necessary for most franchises. If you want a community of owners, that'll be part of that support system. If you're coachable, and this one's really important, if you're coachable and can follow a playbook. So there's some certain breed of, let's say, entrepreneurs that really have to do everything their own way. And if that is you, then this would not be for you, because you really need to start off with following the systems, following the processes. And like me, myself, I enjoy like optimizing and really like making things better, which is a good thing, but you have to start with following the playbook. You can't start off with franchising and just doing everything your own way or wanting to do everything your own way. But over time, as you grow and you get more experience, obviously improving systems and processes is natural progression. You have to be driven to succeed. Franchising is not something that the franchisors is just going to make you successful. You really have to want it and put in the work to make it happen. So what are different ways of exploring options? Well, you can certainly do it yourself. There's over 4,000 brands out there. There's so many brands. And so to try to really understand those brands and compare them is very, very difficult. You can clearly use Google, ChatGPT, and go into YouTube and find information, what's out there. But at the end of the day, what makes it really challenging is that you don't know what you don't know. And so there are things that, you probably should be looking for, but you don't know to look or to ask. And so, and you're spending a lot of money. This is a big investment. So it's something that is really difficult, scary it would be to do on your own. The other option, you could use a coach. I use the word coach, but also in the industry, it's called a consultant or a broker or advisor. I like the word coach because that's how I operate, like a coach. So ideally, you're using a coach because they know the intricacies of franchising, right? You want to use a coach who has ideally done what you want to do and who has your best interest in mind. Pooja had a great question. Are all coaches like fiduciaries? Are they looking, out for your best interest? And they're not. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. And I can tell you that there's a lot of them that have never owned a franchise, never been in business for themselves. And coaching, brokerage, consulting can be a good career. And so the bar is relatively low to get into doing that. So I just recommend you work with someone that you can trust and someone that has, these qualities here. So one of the best parts about working with a coach is that there's no cost associated with it. It's similar to working with a real estate agent on the buying side, where if you end up purchasing a franchise, then a coach will get a referral fee from the franchisor. So there's no cost to you in the meantime to use their services. So the only real downside is if you work with a bad coach, someone who's not looking, that has your best interest in mind. So why athlete to owner? That's my company, obviously. Well, I have the experience, owned and operated my own business, operated at $4 million, multiple units for a period of 14 years. I was a top performer in my system. I had a great team, built a solid team. We had about 20 people on my team, and I was a semi-absentee owner in the end. And I had a, successful exit last year, which was great. As I mentioned before, I'm really into the education part of this business. So it's not just about trying to sell franchises. I don't sell anything. All I do is educate, and I work with my clients on understanding their needs and their goals, and then educating them so that they can make the best decision possible. And so these are the 8 principles of high performance that I figured out through the years and through training, high performance training, through tennis, and applying those to business to find success there. And so these are some of the things that I teach as a framework with my clients. I have podcasts, which has been super fun. Really, again, I bring in high performers from different brands and interview them to showcase both the franchisee and what it takes to be successful, as well as the brand itself. So the process, if you are interested in learning more and exploring, it starts with the introduction call to get to know each other a little bit, understand your needs. I do a deep dive interview where we really understand what those goals are financially and lifestyle, and understand the skill set and what your hobbies are. All those sorts of things that we create a profile so that we can then match you with an appropriate franchise that'll really be optimal for your success. I'll introduce you to franchisors and funding specialists at the beginning of the process so that the funding specialist part is important to know, talk through it with someone who can make sure that you're going to have a high likelihood of being approved for a loan if that's the direction you want to go, or you have money for the ROBs, if you choose to use retirement funds and those sorts of things. And with the franchisors, this is the start of the journey and learning more about those brands. While you're going through that process, this is what we call the due diligence process, where you learn in detail from these franchisors. I'll provide this ongoing coaching and education so that knowing kind of providing what questions to ask. And, when you have questions throughout that process, being able to answer those. That due diligence process is going to be guided by the franchise development person. So every franchisor has a person that works with candidates. And sometimes sometimes the franchise development people work for the organization itself, and sometimes they work for an outside organization that helps them to sell franchises. But either way, they're going to walk you through the process. They'll provide you with this franchise disclosure document. I mentioned this briefly earlier. That's required. If you're a franchise, you have to have a franchise disclosure document. And it has 23 items in it that talk about various things like the founders, financial performance, investment costs, and all those sorts of things. They'll talk about unit economics. So with the specific business, what are the different types of expenses you can expect, and all things related to owning a business, owning one of their franchise businesses. The territory map, so might be certain zip codes. What does that look like for your business? Usually they have some sort of exclusive area. Not all franchises have an exclusive area. Some of them are like business coaching, for example. There's no one area. You can you can have other people next to you, but you can also service people all over the country or the world. And the most important part of this, which we talked about earlier, is doing these validation calls and so not just relying on the document like that franchise disclosure document for some numbers, but actually talking to the owners. This is the most important part of the process, because you're really going to get a better sense of what it's like. What kind of support does the franchisor provide? And this is with existing owners, validation calls. So this is where I provide you with a list of questions that you can ask, including like, how much are you making? What's your revenue look like? What are your expenses like? What kind of startup capital did you actually need? Here's what they're telling me, but what do you recommend? Would you do this again? It's all sorts of questions that you're going to want to ask existing owners.
Are they pretty forthcoming?
So typically, it's how you have to set it up the right way. And I did validation calls as a Shelf Genie franchisee for other people trying to get into the Shelf Genie system. And so I get a range of different people asking me questions. And it was really interesting from my perspective, because some of them never asked me about money. I was like, okay. Like I thought that would be like one of my top things, is asking people about money, right? But I wouldn't start off with that, right? I would, you kind of lead into that, and you have to, because it's a sensitive subject, right? And so I was very forthcoming. I mean, if someone's getting into this business, like they should know what they're dealing with, like the real ins and outs.
Confirmation Day, also known as Discovery Day or Meet the Team Day, is when you're 80 to 90% sure that this is the direction you want to go in. And you usually fly out to the headquarters and meet with executives and people behind the scenes. It's a great opportunity to get a true feel for personality and culture fit. And then you get to decide if this is your path to a better career or not.
What does the franchise path actually look like in real life? I walked away from my corporate career to build a franchise empire that generated over $4 million a year. I break down exactly how I did it in this video right here. Click it now to see if my journey can help start yours.